Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's a pleasure to see this room with our friends, and some of who are here and some of who have told us that they are still joining us, Mumbai and its famous traffic. I'm Yogesh Pawar. I'm a freelance communications professional, and until very recently, I used to be program director with Population First. It's an absolute delight to walk alongside you as the host for this rather special evening. The evening is not merely a date on the calendar, it is a pause for us, where we crane our necks to look back in celebration of the 24 years of Population First. These 2 dozen years have been marked by persistence, purpose, and that rare ability to show up for what truly matters. Some of the series of this movement must have hit each one of you in a special way, some of these things that have happened, and which is why they resonate with us in different ways. All the people here, they resonate differently. So, which is one of the reasons why we all are here. And as we gather, we also hold in our thoughts our founder and advertising legend, Bobby Sista, whose work didn't just sell stories but shape them with conscience, courage, and care. On behalf of Population First, a heartfelt welcome to each one of you. Before we begin, let's take a quick pulse of the number of people who are here. How many of you have come to Population First events before this? Okay, quite a few. Anyone here for the first time? Okay. So we have a Bharatanatyam exponent who's here for the first time. Good. So it seems like we have a mix of the fresh and the familiar among the crowd today. We all engage with media every single day, sometimes by choice, and sometimes just because algorithms quietly push us towards rabbit holes on YouTube and on Instagram, sometimes on Twitter also. I'm more on Twitter, which is why I brought that up. Beyond the scroll and stream, media quietly shapes how we see the world, how we see each other, and perhaps, most importantly, how we see ourselves. And carrying forward that sense of responsibility so intrinsic to Mr. Sista's legacy, this evening brings together thought, dialogue, and a touch of creative magic. To formally begin, it is my honor to invite someone many of us know, admire, and affectionately call Pops. Mr. K.V. Sridhar, Executive Trustee of Population First, India's leading ad man, a collector of Cannes Lions, 23 of them, no less, and over 400 awards that could probably fill a room or two if they were all put together. Sridharji, may I invite you to formally welcome everyone present?
Good evening. I'm talking to the people who are here. It shows, does not matter how many are there, it shows love and respect for the organization Population First, especially Mr. Bobby Sista. He's a visionary, and then he has dedicated almost second part of his life to Population First and then the cause of gender sensitivity. I've known Bobby for a very, very long time. Since the time he took over Agency Sisters, since the time I came to advertising in late 70s. Not just Bobby, his father was also an iconic advertising person. Those of you who don't know, probably one of the first Indian advertising post-independence India really have seen what Bobby's father really did for the country and advertising. And Bobby is responsible for me to really be associated with Population First. I'm very guilty. Even today also I'm very guilty that I am not being able to give the kind of time Bobby used to give. I'm guilty of that. I'll try and then correct as much as I can. But my special thanks are to two people who are in the room, have been the pillars of carrying Bobby's vision, Dr. Sharda and Dolly. And, each time I see Dolly, I get inspired, correct? That the kind of energy she possesses, she can give a run for money to any Gen Zs or even Alphas. Yeah, it's wonderful. I welcome, all the guests today and then thank them for continuous support. Dr. Lakshmi Lingam and Mrs. Kalpana, Radhika and Harshada. I really thank and then the performance today. It's wonderful. It's just that the love and respect, for ourselves is far more important than anything else. If we respect ourselves, we can respect somebody else, or there's a reason for somebody else to respect us. The commitment which every member and every supporter of this cause are the people who respect themselves first and then get respected by others. So I will not take much time, and I thank everyone for supporting, and maybe kind of pledge that I will continue to give whatever I can to the organization, and thanks to all the people, especially Dr. Sharda and Dolly and all the others. Thanks to Yogesh, in spite of not being part of the organization, still coming back and then supporting. Lovely, thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Sridharji, for those generous and deeply reflective words. You've reminded us that Population First is not merely an organization. It is in many ways a quiet movement, one that nudges, questions, and reshapes the narratives we so often take for granted. And that when creativity meets purpose, something rather powerful happens. It unsettles, it challenges, and occasionally also attempts to transform. And now that the opening batsman has hit a sixer with his opening, we come to the evening's keynote, one that promises both depth and direction. It's my privilege to invite Dr. Lakshmi Lingam. Dr. Lingam is a noted gender expert, teacher, trainer, mentor, researcher, and policy advocate who has led multiple studies backed by national and international agencies and advised multilateral bodies as well as central and state governments on gender equality. A distinguished academic, she is a chair professor at the School of Public Health, Dr. D.Y. Patil University, and spent decades at the Tata Institute of Social Sciences as a guiding force, including as Dean and Pro-Vice Chancellor. She's also been my professor when I was studying there. Her work bridges public health, gender, and social justice with rare clarity. She also led a US consulate-funded study on Hindi cinema, offering key insights into gender representation on and off screen. Dr. Lingam, may I please request you to address us?
I can see the screen. Yeah, good evening, and thank you very much for this invitation. I'm delighted, Dr. Sharda, you thought of me. Delighted that Dolly ji and all the board members of Population First, my former student Yogesh, and the entire Population First team for putting it all together. So I've been asked to speak on, who tells the story, power, gender and representation in media. I'll go to the first slide. So for us to say that power, gender, and representation are intrinsic to Hindi cinema, or for that matter to any cinema, is almost stating the obvious. And very often when we speak about representation, we tend to fall into this little box saying that women are being objectified, or that there's too much of skin show, or that women are, part of the item numbers. But I think we need to go beyond that to look at how do we understand representation. So when we often talk about representation, then we are looking at the form and the content, which is like what is the narrative, what is shown, form, how is it shown, and then also who is creating this, right? So these are the key questions that we need to ask. So kindly go to the next slide. So when we try to, did you miss one slide, or this is the one? How do we decode it? Yeah. So what is representation? If we were to go into again the details, it's not just about whom do we see on the screen, but it's also important to ask not just the visibility question, but what is the voice? What kind of weight do they have in that particular film? And what is the agency that they actually display on the screen in the story? And how are they framed? For that matter, any character, how is it framed? And is there any significant stereotyping that's happening there? And how central is this character for that particular narrative? And are the characters also shown as very one-dimensional, or they show the weight of the intersectionality? Like, who is this person? What class background do they come from? What caste background do they come from? What kind of ethnicity or religious background do they actually seem to be representing? A lot of that also is something that we need to look at, whether that is something we are seeing on the screen or not. So in order to actually explicate what I mean by representation, I thought I can actually share with you a research study that we have done, which was funded by the US Consulate. And the title of that particular report also and the project was Lights, Camera and Time for Action, recasting a gender equality compliant Hindi cinema. So it's basically calling out to look at what does the Hindi cinema do in terms of gender representation, but also look at if we were to change this narrative, what is it we should be doing, okay? So towards that, what we did was we looked at, 35 films, and the project actually commenced in 2020, around 2021, and 2019 was the last theatrical release because the project happened during the COVID times. So we took 2019 as our benchmark, and in that year, 25 top grossing films, we took those 25. And then we also wanted to look at how do these films differ from what we also call as women-centric films. And we chose 12 films that were released between 2013 to 2019. And those 10 films were suggestions that came from young media school students from across Mumbai. And we tried to see how do these films pan out within themselves and in comparative perspective. So what we looked there was, we looked at what do you see on the screen. We also looked at what do you see behind the screen. That is, whenever you have a film that you watch, towards the end or sometimes in the beginning, you have the entire titles that scroll as to who contributed to the film. So we actually did screenshots of every screen and then actually counted by the names. And in India, we can figure out, unless you have a name like Kiran or something, it can be a male name or a female name. Mostly you can figure out it's a male or a female name. Of course, we can't make out gender queerness in that behind the screen. So we did that kind of counting also. Then we also looked at what is the ecosystem. How many associations are there? How many men and women are there? And also whenever there are awards being given, each year, what are the awards and what are the awards that women get? So women will get awards which are the typical ones like best female actor, female singer, but what about general actor kind of thing, okay? So we did that also. So 3 things, what is this on the screen, what is behind the screen, and what is in the ecosystem. And some of my colleagues then looked at, what is the experiences of women directors and women screenwriters. Then we also looked at what do critics do, women critics do with films. Because when we watch a film, we're not a blank slate. We engage with it, and we also try and give a pushback to films that we think are not as per what we think they should be. So in these films, if we totally got about 1,930 characters. And often when you do a quantitative research of films, what counts is who do you see on the screen and whether they have a name and a dialogue. Okay, only then they get counted. Because on the screen, you will see people who are there in a market, in a cricket stadium, in a football ground, or in a railway station, or in a hospital. But they just fill the crowds and they won't have any names. But all other characters who have a name and have a dialogue, sometimes they might be characters who have no name but they have a dialogue, those get counted. In that sense, then we got 1,930 characters in 35 films. Okay? And then we also looked at them as cis female and cis male and gender queerness. And of course, it does collapse sex and gender, but we tried our best. And what you see is in box office films, you have something like 76% of characters are men and about 1/4 of characters are female. Whereas in the women-centric films, you have at least 1/3 of the characters that are female and 2/3 are male, and at least a small percentage of genderqueer individuals. And sometimes the stories are also on genderqueer individuals among the women-centric films. Next slide, please. So what do we see in this? Okay, in this representation, what is it we see? We, putting together the box office and the women-centric films, we find that 72% of the characters are male characters, and about 26 are cis female characters, and about 2% are genderqueer, okay? And what we also find is just 0.5% of characters are people with disabilities. And in most of the films, you can also buy their names. Majority of their names would be like Chopra, Khanna, Tiwari, Pandey. By their names, you can make out what is the caste background they come from. So majority of the characters are male, are from dominant castes, are able-bodied, and are in the age group of 21 to 45 years, and are also predominantly Hindu. Okay? And majority of the women also are Hindu, but apart from being Hindu and from the dominant caste, they are also fair, they are thin, and they are so-called beautiful. Okay? And women-centric films are a lot more, attempt more diversity, and also attempt to have stories which are different from the typical box office films. And we also said that, male-centric films are very outbound. They're war, politics, crime, and all that. And women-centric films are inbound. It's about family, relationships, sexuality, struggles in life, etc. So, next slide. So we also try to look at what kind of characters do we see when we watch films. So obviously you have a lead character. It could be a male or a female, but largely, let's say, lead character. And then you have a co-lead. And that picture, if you see, you will see Munnabai and Circuit. Okay, so that's like the lead and co-lead. And then you have a romantic co-lead. So sometimes you have the woman as a co-lead, but also romantically connected to the male lead. And then you have clearly a romantic interest. Okay, and then finally, you have other characters. So in films, you have lots of people who are doctors, teachers, nurses, wardens and all, lots of other characters. So we try to look at the characters on the screen and try to categorize them based on this. And what do we see? Go to the next slide. Okay, and not much to really guess. You do find in the box office films, males are the leads. And if they have co-leads, they do have males again in the co-leads. And typically the romantic interest is that of a woman. And okay, sometimes you might have a romantic co-lead. In the case of women-centric films, the woman is the lead. You may have sometimes a male co-lead. In fact, you might also have a genderqueer individual as a co-lead. And then you find here the story goes up and down. Here the male is the romantic interest. Okay, and in the, that's the kind of, categorizations that you see in the box office films. Now, these films, we actually have assessed them on 19 parameters, and there was at least five sub-parameters for each of these 19. Right from looking at what do you see in terms of love and romance, what kind of dialogues are there, What kind of clothing are they wearing? Does the character look like they are really showing that they have the power to make decisions, or they look like they just take the lead from somebody else? You know, what kind of caste-related dialogues do you hear, etc. We also did the typical what is called a Bechdel test. So when you see a film and you see, for example, two women on the screen, and you look and try to listen to what are their dialogues. Are those two women talking to each other, talking something other than about men? Because you will see in screen, mainstream films, two women will be talking to each other, but probably they'll be talking about a male crush that they have, or a male lover, or it's about the father, or it's about making good food for the family, things like that. But you will find in the women-centric films, two women talking to each other are probably talking about their lives. They're talking about some struggle that they're going through, or about their aspirations, or about whatever they would like to do in their life, and it has nothing to do with men, right? So when you go with that kind of test, which is called Bechdel test, it is critiqued a lot, but even at the minimum when you see, you will find that majority of the box office mainstream films fail in that. I think only 36% of the films pass that test, whereas at least 50 to 60% of the women-centric films pass that test. And as I told you, we also looked at off-screen and in the ecosystem. So if you go back and look at how many people do you see in the crew based on the people who have been credited, okay? So we find that in the female crew, there's something like 4,131 women and 26,328 men in the crew, okay? And it's like for every woman on the screen, you have something like, I think 7 or 8 women behind the screen who are contributing to the films. And in the case of men, for every male lead actor or every male on the screen, you have 19 men behind the screen. Okay, so they actually are more numbers on the screen and more numbers also behind the screen. And then if you look at where are they organized in various departments, of course, in the women-directed films, you have more women in the crew, okay? They do bring more women, they train more women, they mentor more women, but typically box office films, we do find in our thing, we did find there were more women in the crew, but they come in the technical department. So if you go to the next slide, you will see where are these women, okay? So box office topping films had 48% women, and women-centric had only 44. So while this looks like, you know, box office films may actually hire more women, but actually they are coming in the visual effects, which is actually not directly an industry linked, not directly a media industry. It's not a film industry. It's a IT industry that contributes to films. So a lot of films where you have VFX, okay? So women who are doing technical education, doing, you know, computer science or animation and digital and all, they are coming in the IT departments to do the VFX work for box office, but they don't contribute to the creative decisions that are made to make a film, okay? So you do find the percentage of women in all the major departments not very high. And then if you look at where you find them crucially missing, because within filmmaking, the departments where you have cinematography, sound, editing, lyrics, script, these are the most significant, and you find very small percentage of women there, okay? Now when you see such few women in this crew, in the making of films, where do we point our fingers to complain, you know? So go to the next slide. So what we find actually is, you know, there's a reproduction of structural hierarchies, okay? There are structural hierarchies in our everyday life, and you see those getting reproduced even in the film industry, where the decision-making power lies with the producers, directors, and the star actors who are male, and there are not too many women there, okay? And women are marginalized. They're not there in the direction, cinematography, and screenwriting. You have some women who are screenwriters, barely any who are directors. And in fact, script writing, particularly lyrics, I don't think there's even one woman at this point of time. Music also. Okay, at some point you had some women. Now you hardly see any women in the, as women music directors. So what is the ecosystem? Yeah, what is the ecosystem? You barely have any women in film schools, okay? How many public funded film schools do we have? Very few, just count on your fingers. The private schools, obviously, because the fees is very high, you would have more men. And if there are women, probably they come into the acting sector, not necessarily the technical sectors. Because if you're, post your job, if you're not going to, post your education, if you're not going to get jobs, families are not going to put money there, right? So your pipeline is choked, you don't have too many women in the pipeline, and even if they come out of the pipeline, they're not going to get enough work in the industry. And when we did the study, we also noticed that a lot of times they don't have the, POXO committees, not POXO, sorry, the POSH committees. Okay, sexual harassment. Now some of the production units are setting them up. In fact, very often they wouldn't have enough toilets. You know, women who work late nights, they're not, like you have the IT industry call center women, they're dropped by a car or a bus. You don't have such a facility. Okay, so you'll invariably have single women who can rough it out, who work in the industry. The moment they touch their biological career graph where they find a partner, they get married, they have children, they are out of the industry. You know, women actors are now on the shelf, but not for too long, and they also are at least some characters being written for senior women nowadays, but not in mainstream cinema. There you see a lot of variety happening in the OTT serials. So, lack of mentorship, workplace issues like wage pay gaps, harassment risks, and also structural exclusion from decision making. Recently, Deepika Padukone spoke about fewer hours of work and the way she was getting trolled, saying she's not professional, tells us about the concerns. In fact, she doesn't even talk about pay gap because she's one of the highest paid, but lots of women don't get paid that way at all. So you have clearly capital constraints, lack of social capital that women don't have because they don't have those kind of women networks. There are clearly labor condition issues, and the representation outcomes that you see has this pipeline in the background. Okay, please go to the next slide. So I'll rush now, I won't go too much into details, but what we have seen was the 2019 films and the interviews and all. But if you cut to 2025, which is the last year where we looked at the top 10 films, you will find that the action films and the war genre really were the top. These are the films. And the next slide. And you have the spy supernatural thriller genre. And then you have romantic and comedy. And Sayara is the only film that had a woman co-lead of significance in 2025. And comedy has lots of women, but they're all slapstick, they're all eye candy, they don't really contribute much. And investigative, again, nothing much. Inclusive, only this one was there, Sitaram Zami Par. So if you look at how women are represented in these 10 films, central co-lead is only Sayara. Supporting a little bit meaningful are some of those films. And then romantic interests, majority of them are there. For all the war and romantic slapstick are all women, 4. And peripheral and inconsequential was Skyforce. So what are the overall observations that we have, whether it is 2019 or 2025, is there's a persistent masculine centrality to the narratives. And women continue to play conventional female roles. Of course, they have graduated out of the sacrificial sister and the crying mother to more sexy, in the face and skimpily dressed, enjoying themselves kind of characters. The genre-driven norms, very patriarchal. The romance films has women as eye candy. The war films have them to spin the actor, to give him the character arc, etc. Next slide, please. So if we were to talk about how do we craft change in this current scenario, and I know Population First through Ladli Awards continuously works towards crafting change. So need for diverse representations. People in filmmaking have to also be diverse. So films that actually contribute huge money to the exchequer needs to also look at how does it plow back some of the money into film schools, give scholarships for women to come into making films, make the workplace, the set, lot more inclusive and also gender sensitive. greater government and film industry collaborations, and also producer guilds and unions definitely need to see how they ensure that the labor conditions and gender sensitivity is brought in much more centrally. Yeah, thank you. Thank you, and the report is sitting on ResearchGate. If you can pick your phone and take a picture, you can always go back and see the report, which is more detailed. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Lakshminingam. Can I request Dr. Sharda to give her a memento of our appreciation, please? Sangeeta. Come, Dr. Lakshminingam, for you. This is. How many people here have watched Dhurandhar? How many people have watched Dhurandhar 2? Well, clearly, all that Dr. Lakshminingam said, you see how much of it is needed and why we need some more of this study. At a time when toxic masculinity is being celebrated at the box office, and people like Sandeep Vanga feel that women being slapped is a form of expressing love. So I feel studies like what Dr. Lakshminingam is doing are very important. Thank you very much. That was not only insightful, but I hope it was insightful as in INCITEFUL also. It was grounding and in many ways quietly stirring. Ma'am, you set the tone for what follows. Before we move into the conversation that we're going to have, may I invite someone who has been central to shaping this 24-year journey. Who would walk us better through this journey than Dr. A.L. Sharda, our founder trustee? Her commitment to media advocacy and gender-just communication has been the heartbeat of the Ladli initiative, and her commitment to inclusive development has steered our Amchi initiative down the years. Dr. Sharda, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Yogesh, for that introduction. And thank you, Lakshmi, for really setting the context for today's event. And it's really, for today's conversations, I mean, we've been working on this for so many years. And you know, I'm very happy that we are at this stage after 24 years where everybody is talking about it and doing their bit to bring about change. And since it is the foundation day, I have to talk about Mr. Sista, our founder and a great human being. Only the other day I was telling Vijayan that I've spent same amount of time with Mr. Sista as I have spent with my father. My father passed away when I was 22 years old, and I spent 22 years with Mr. Sista. And it was always, I am a little crazy. I come up with very different ideas, different formats for doing things, events, etc. And my mind is always buzzing with ideas. He is the one who understood the energy and the intent, and he was always there with me, supporting and saying, go ahead and give. I mean, he was my sounding board. I could talk to him anything, and I think that's what made this organization what it is. It is definitely not a run-of-the-mill kind of an organization which did things the way they were being done all these years. We have done many innovative, interesting events and taken up initiatives. And I think that's what marks Population First journey. And I'm really happy that, I'm happy about my engagement with Population First for 24 years. It's been a great journey, and it's good, a journey becomes beautiful when you have a good, you know, co-partner or co-traveler with you. And Mr. Sista was one of those. And I want to share one story which I usually share in my training programs. There's a mother bird, and then she has her chicks on a tree in a nest. And one day when she comes back, the chicks say, Mom, we have to go from this tree. We have to leave this tree because the owner of this land has come and he said that this tree has to be cut. And he said that he's going to get people from outside to cut the tree. The mother bird says, don't worry, nothing will happen. So next day when she comes back again, the chicks say, Mom, they didn't come to cut the tree, but the farmer again said that he's going to call somebody from the village to cut the tree. Mother bird says, don't worry, it's okay, nothing will happen. Then third day, they again say, the person from the village has not come, but today the farmer was very angry, and he said that he will ask his sons to come and cut the tree. Then she says, nothing to worry, just relax. On fourth day when she comes, the chicks are very agitated, and they say, Mom, today the farmer came again, and he said that tomorrow he's going to come and cut the tree. Then the mother bird says, okay, let's fly away. Okay, why I'm telling this story is, unless the change comes from within, nothing can be done. Because he is determined, he wants it, so he gets it done. And we have worked with this philosophy all through our engagement on both AMCHI and population and Ladli project. We have never tried to create a huge organization with a large number of people. We have never tried to do any of those things. With a very lean team of 4 or 5 people, we have managed to do a lot. Even in our AMCHI project, for instance, we don't create any infrastructure. We don't create anything that we give to the community. What we give to the community is the ability to work on change themselves. Only when they work on change themselves do we have change that is sustainable. So through workshops, through sensitization of both the government and the community, we build bridges between the government and the community. Because there is a lot of mistrust between government and the community. They don't trust each other. Government thinks, oh, these people are ignorant, they don't know anything, so they try to impose what they want to do on the community. And the community thinks, oh, government has its own targets, it's doing it for its own interest, so they are not involved. But when we bring the enormous capital and enormous human resources that are there with the government, with the community which is aware, which is willing to work for its own change, you see transformative change in the villages. We are working in 150 villages. I know a woman who was facing domestic violence, today being the biggest or the most loudest, powerful voice of our AMCHI team. So this is the kind of change we have seen among the women through our livelihood initiatives and other initiatives, but the kind of money we spent in providing services to the people is minimal. We haven't given any money to any individual, but we focus on engaging with people, making them responsible for the change they want to see. Similarly, with Ladli also, we have never tried to create communication material. We know that whatever I write or whatever we prepare, communication material that we prepare, be it even if I get Bill Gates Foundation money and I do a beautiful film spending 50 lakhs or 40 lakhs, I will never have the money to pay the media time. I will never be able to get the top slot on TV or anywhere. The visibility, the amplification is going to be very limited. But at the same time, if I say somebody who's in the business, influence somebody who's in the business of communication, and they make a good film, they make a good ad, they make a good OTT production, that is going to reach to thousands of people and in a very convincing way and in a very impactful way. For instance, Sridhar's Badhai Ho Beti Hui Hai, that ad was being played on prime time. It was sponsored, it was a Sony TV production, and it had Amitabh Bachchan promoting it. Can I ever get that kind of a, reach? I won't get. But by influencing the influencers, we were able to reach out to so many people. After completing 24 years, when Population First is on the verge of being closed, I'm very happy I feel every minute of my 24 years journey is well spent, and it really makes me, satisfied when I see WWC working for change, when I see ICW working for change, and NWMI working for change, IAA working Voice of Change, when they have their initiatives, all talking about how to improve the content, communication, and also how to bring greater gender sensitivity in media and advertising institutions, organizations. So on this day when I hope we will celebrate 25th anniversary, but if we cannot, treat this as a final one. And yeah, um, it's nice to say that we had a great journey, and all of you take it forward. And it is your responsibility now, I'm passing the baton to you. It's your responsibility to take it forward and continue the change. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Sharda, for those thoughts. That little story which she told us about the mother bird and the chicks, till she came to the end of the story, I first thought that it is, she is the mother bird and we are all the chicks, because every time the dark clouds gather on the horizon, we've always still looked out to her, and she's held our hand along with Anuja ji, who is here. So they've always sort of reassured us, don't worry, we'll ride this one out. Don't worry, we'll ride this one out. And that's how I've actually worked with them closely, and I've seen this happen. So when you were telling us that story just now, those thoughts kept coming to mind. Along with the emotional aspect of how it's natural that she's had this 24-year-long journey, and she's seen, the bird is ready to fly away. So wo stage pe hota hi emotional lage. But this is also a reminder that the representation is only the beginning. Like she said it very rightly, it's now in your hands to take the baton and run. So the reminder that representation is only the beginning. Responsibility is where the real work lies. So that's where now the responsibility is in our hands to take it forward. So I feel very privileged that I began my journey with Ladli as a journalist, and there's been so much sensitization and a revisitation of all that I'd done sitting in that class, in Dr. Lakshmingam's class or Chadata's class or Anjali Dave's class, and how all those things I was able to revisit and how that has impacted my journalism. We now move on to what promises to be a lively and layered conversation, from representation to responsibility, mainstreaming gender across media. But before we begin, a quick question to all of you. What do you think? Tell me how many, raise your hands, how many of you think media shapes society? How many of you feel media simply mirrors what happens in society? Okay. So as expected, there are no easy answers there, and perhaps that conversation that we are going to have now will sort of come up with some of the answers, or at least point us in the directions of where those answers are going to come from. Let me briefly introduce our esteemed panelists. We have Kalpana Sharma. Again, this harks back to my college days. Many, many years ago, I was in Nandini Sardesai's class in St. Xavier's, and she walked into the class with a news story with Kalpana Sharma's byline, and she wanted the class to discuss it. So can you imagine? So, I mean, for me to then speak to her later as a journalist and also to interact with her at Population First. She's been an independent journalist, a columnist, and an author. This Mumbaikar has spent over 5 decades in journalism. She has held senior positions at Himmat Weekly, Indian Express, Times of India, The Hindu, and the EPW, the Economic and Political Weekly. Currently, as columnist for the newslaundry.com, she examines press freedom, accountability, and representation. Her reporting has long focused on environmental, urban, and developmental issues, as well as gender, human rights, and the role of media in shaping public discourse. Kalpana ji has authored The Silence and the Storm, Narratives of Violence Against Women in India, and Rediscovering Dharavi, Stories from Asia's Largest Slum. She has also edited Single by Choice, Happily Unmarried Women, and Missing Half the Story, Journalism as if Gender Matters. We also have with us Radhika Padmakumar, a cinematographer and a member of the WCC. She is best known for her work in the documentary series Faces of Climate Resilience and Malayalam independent feature Palama, Do You See Me? In another avatar, Radhika worked closely in casting for the iconic film Two States. Our next panelist, Harshada Menon, is an executive director at Ogilvy. The storyteller finds ideas in the everyday and turns them into moving moments, from crafting iconic campaigns for brands like Unilever, McDonald's, Stay Free, and Oreo, to leading teams that built brands with heart and purpose. She's consistently pushed creative boundaries in advertising. Her 2 decades in shaping culture through sharp insights, warmth, and wit are testimony that ideas are omnipresent. One just needs to find them. Dr. Sharda's famous line, this brings us, ideas are all around. You need to just go and pick them up and work on them. And when I wrote this line, you were very much in my thoughts. Rashmi Lamba, who will be wearing the moderator's hat for this session, brings a wide-ranging career across film and television production, advertising, festivals, and corporate communications with independent ventures in India, the UAE, and Canada. She has held key roles at international film festivals, served on the UNAOC Plural Plus jury, launched the FICCI FLO Film Festival as festival director, and advised the Mava Sambhav Traveling Film Festival. This gender parity advocate is India Council Chair for the Gina Davis Institute on Gender and Media, advancing tools like the inclusion quotient and spell check for bias, and has led industry engagement on a landmark TISS study on gender in Hindi cinema. You can't go very far without bringing in TISS. She has also directed Begumpura, the Vibes Colony in Canada, and is currently developing a project on redefining masculinity in India. May I invite our esteemed panelists to please take the stage.
I think we'll make this very conversational, and I'm glad we didn't call it a panel. So I took the permission to keep it conversational, and I think we have such a fantastic lineup. And also, I think I would like to first, of course, start with another round of applause for our very own Ladli, who's been nurtured by everyone, who's made her into such a strong icon and a strong voice for equal representation and inclusion. So thank you for that. And I think I would want to also give a sort of, a bit of attention to Ladli, because I loved what you've said on the homepage with Ladli, where she says that if we influence the media, advertising, films, and the youth to redefine their values, gender perceptions, and equations through innovative interventions, then we would be empowering them to be the change agents, and thus impacting the gender and social developmental indices, and of course, the challenges to change mindsets, which is what I think, agenda is for all of us here. And as mentioned, I've had a very nomadic life. So today I am wearing my sort of favorite hat of the India Council Chair for the Gina Davis Institute, which is a pro bono kind of activity, but that's because I was so inspired. I was following what they were doing, and I was very inspired when 20 years ago she came up with the mantra that if she can see it, she can be it, to find role models for her own daughter. And with the changing times, that's been adapted to if they can see it, they can be it. And of course, the universal maxim of see it, be it, which we have an alumni of that program here with us, with Harshada having been through that, which is not a Gina Davis program, but a Cannes Lion, I think, thing. So of course that brings us to the agenda why we're here on the topic that Yogesh has mentioned about mainstreaming gender cross media and moving the arc from representation to actual responsibility to do that. And of course we have the exceptional ladies here who will be joining the conversation, and we've kind of discussed a few points. I'm still old-fashioned, so I use paper because if the screen goes off, I'll be panic-ridden. So bear with me. So I think what I'm going to do is just, I think 2 days ago, the 2026 report that FICCI brings out with Ernst & Young on the media and entertainment industry in India, that was launched. And the figures are just staggering, which also then tells us how important this sector is. I'm not going to bore you with facts and figures, but I think 3 or 4 that stood out for me was that it's going to be worth 3 trillion rupees by next year, which actually in percentage surpasses the growth of the GDP per capita in India. So that's how important this industry is. And what the figures that were very stunning was that India produces over 200,000 hours of content. I'm sorry, I was told that you don't like that word. But also the people have consumed over 880 billion hours of social media across India. So, that's the, I think, expanse that we're talking about as an influencing agent, platform, whatever we might call it. But I guess just a takeaway from that report before we go into the conversation is that I think with the consumption, it's now no longer a discretionary pursuit that, should I read a book or should I do this? Because it's overtaken our lives whether it's for information, whether it's for, escapism, entertainment. And the most important thing that they spoke about is that in this digital era, a lot of the evolving audiences and consumers are actually increasingly expressing who they are in this, which is why coming to our talk of representation and responsibility becomes very important. And I know Ladli and the Population First Forum always raises these very timely and vital issues. And so I think what we would like to do is go beyond this data. Though I must confess, just a reference again, why I was so impressed with the Gina Davis Institute, or now we have Ormax and we have Ovamania, is unless you present a bit of data, people will say, oh, but of course we're making the change. We made Pink, we made Thappad, we did all that, but the figures, as Dr. Lakshmi showed, and I was just trying to engage with the industry with that report. And fortunately, we got a lot of positive response. I think the figures were just staggeringly low in what you saw on screen. So as we go along, if you want to share a burning thought, do please raise your hand. We will request you to make it a question, and then we can have discussion and comments later with the audience. But if you are holding a thought, we'll make it conversational, so do please interact with us. And of course, as we know, it's a privilege to have Kalpana Sharma with us, and who's been a kind of trailblazer in this space. And you've kind of actually experienced and voiced a lot about the then and now. And I think you have had that 50 years of experience with the narratives of what mainstream reporting was and how the media might be now, the reportage having changed, and if there is any reportage. And of course, you've done the reportage around the feminist movement, and of course, pun intended, on the burning issues that we've all experienced. So what if we cut to the digital era now? How do you think we're going to handle this? Because it's all so blurred,
So I'm probably the wrong person to be asked that question, given that I am from the typewriter generation where we never talked about media, we talked about the press, because that's what it was. Yeah, and cinema was different. And there was no TV in terms of news that started in the 70s, and very limited, and then only later it became even for journalism, it became the prime medium. But newspapers have survived in India because as literacy has grown, people have wanted to read. And the first thing they pick up is a newspaper, or I should say was a newspaper. Because certainly now with digital, with smartphones, you really have to ask the question, we as journalists have to ask, who's a journalist? You know, everybody is a journalist now, anybody with a smartphone and a camera. So I think, given that this reality of, we can't even say now, as journalists particularly, what is the media? And by media, I'm talking about journalism and not advertising and cinema. We have to think again then of the things that we talked about in the 70s about representation, or increasing the number of women who would be in the media, in journalism. Does any of that count anymore? I'm asking you this question because honestly, I don't think there's a simple answer. Because from my experience, it's not automatic if you get more women into, say, a newspaper that things will change. They don't. You may have women bosses, it doesn't mean automatically that things will change. Often the men are more feminists. I've had more feminist bosses than women bosses. So, so I think, we should not fall into this trap of this automatic thing, which many of us did in those initial years. We counted, the number of items that were women-centered, and we thought that represented something, in terms of change. We counted the number of women who were in leadership positions within the media and really believed that would lead to a change, We fought those who worked on the desk, for instance, in newspapers, fought against sexist language being used and succeeded. But then you still have to ask, if they succeeded in removing Eve, for instance, which was used for women, if we succeeded in getting rid of what was called the third edit in many English, I'm talking about English language newspapers, which were very risque in the way, that would be a mild way of saying what they were. Even the cartoons, Mario's cartoons and others, those were just like there, and there was not much objection to it. But removing those, has that made a difference in attitudes? I would seriously question it. Because, misogyny, I believe, is so deep-rooted in attitudes of men, even today in India. I can't talk about the whole world, but of men, that because it's inculcated, I think, it just gets in there. And the danger today, I think, really, is that we seem to be going backwards. On the one hand, you do have women visible everywhere. For us amongst journalists, certainly we saw a real difference when private television channels started. Because suddenly after Doordarshan, where the women were the news readers, we saw many more women who were reporting and out there with a mic going to all kinds of things, covering conflict, etc. And again, we thought that that would make a big difference. But amongst us, as we've talked as women journalists, we really question, has it made a difference in terms of attitudes? And I think this is something all of us should think about in terms of the impact of the media on these kind of issues. Because merely changing the manner in which women are presented, I'm not sure that makes a difference, but I'm not sure it shifts. Because I think it's a societal issue. And to me, it's a bit like the progressive laws that women have fought for in this country, whether it's on rape, whether it's on dowry. And yet, Supreme Court just yesterday has had to tell off some courts saying, you're not supposed to reveal the identity of the survivor. Can you believe this? This is 2026. We were talking about this in the 80s. Until today, you have judges who don't know that it's the law that you're not supposed to reveal. Newspapers that don't know that you're not supposed to print an FIR and give away the story when a survivor files an FIR, and still these things coming, And television channels, they make such a big deal about violence against women because they know it draws eyeballs, not because they're really concerned. So I'm raising these questions because I don't think there are simple answers. And I think to strategize how to bring about change, I think we have to do a reality check about the politics in this country, about the attitudes that prevail in this country, and about the economy. I think all three things we have to think about. Because when you have an economy that has become so consumer-centered that everybody has become narcissistic, when you have technology that feeds into that narcissism, so where does this come in, what we are talking about, you know? So then women, obviously objectifying women, if it helps in the sales of a newspaper, you know, I was in that transition period with, in print media when suddenly we were told with the newspaper I worked with, I think most of you can guess which it was, that we were brand managers, and we were all like astounded. Hello, excuse me, I am a journalist, you know. And then suddenly it became all the news that sells your brand that goes in. And then you started having supplements, which were paid supplements, but pretending to be journalism. You know, and that in the 90s, what changed is now coming back to bite us, because now those of us who feel the job of journalists to speak truth to power, to give voice to the voiceless, there is no space. The space has been hogged by this economy, this consumer economy, and this desire to sell. So, I mean, I don't want to start on the depressing note, but I truly believe that any of us who's concerned must look at it realistically and then see. I think there are areas that change can come about. I think there are interventions can be made in the most difficult of spaces. I believe that because I've seen it. But it must be done on the basis of looking at this reality in the face.
And that's really been very well encapsulated. And we will come back to the collective power of the network that you have. But I think, and feel free to, you know, jump into conversations if we can or anybody else. But, you know, circling back to that report that I was talking, because it's so fresh off the press, a large percentage of the growth in the figures that they quoted was due to advertising. And in advertising, over 60% was due to the digital ad revenue. So, you know, that's in that ecosystem, that's the reality. But as we've been discussing, that when we say digital or we say advertising, and we are talking about across media, the lines are being blurred as formats and, you know, I think a very big factor is the experience content, that you actually experience it or it's immersive, and those are now the buzzwords. So, and of course AI is the sort of, you know, big monster in the room with, you know, algorithms, etc. So I think it's a very exciting and challenging time for all of you in the ad agencies, I'm sure. So, and I think we're moving from, as you said, the times are changing. So I think they're calling it moving from a finite to an infinite era is what, these are all buzzwords I picked up. But do you think that this fundamental change now that's happening in re-architecturing this whole setup could actually be a very good opportunity to, you know, and a pathway, a rapid driver kind of thing to, you know, innovate with purpose, with a focus, and across the ecosystem to sort of, you know, convert this disruption that's happening with, it's totally disruptive and a little baffling. But can we do that to, you know, maybe sustain leadership, whether it's gendered leadership or it's equal leadership, and of course the equitable gender norms that we can all hope for. So, and you've done so much in that with your brands and your Cannes Lion winning campaigns, and so congratulations for that, and it's wonderful to have you here. I think you have a mic there.
Hi, can you, yeah. The fact that you've got so many platforms and so many places that you can voice your opinions, it puts more responsibility on us to use it well. I look at it very selfishly. I have an 11-year-old daughter, so when I do work, I ask myself, is this going to make you know, the society, the world better for her, you know, when she grows up? So it's a very simple sort of you know, benchmark for me. The problem is that, you know, the portrayal of women in advertising still needs to be much, much better. And that's not happening because you don't have enough women in the boardrooms where they're making decisions, where they're writing scripts or whether they're approving, right? And if you don't have women there, you will not have, the work that represents there. And it makes business sense for advertising to do that, right? If you see someone who's representing you, you will buy the product, from that person. So I feel it's even more on us to kind of be more responsible and do that. So that's...
But what now with the use of different tools, including the AI tools and a lot of the fakes that are being created, what do you think are the dangers of that in terms of, a lot of fake representation that I think is coming in? And I truly believe that advertising is very pertinent because you can't really control an ad when you're viewing something, whether it's through the algorithm or it's a media placement. You might even have a paid subscription, but you can't actually avoid seeing an ad. Or if you go to a cinema hall, you have to sit through those ads. So it's a very, very strong influencer.
Yeah.
So how do you feel about that?
Absolutely. So which is why I'm saying that, when we're making ads today, we put more responsibility on ourselves to make sure that, what you're showing is, to the liking of, or it kind of is on par on what you want to say. So whenever we're making ads, we make sure that, you're representing well, there's diversity. It's not just tokenism. And I think that's, most important, You have to be extremely careful because, there are 100, people watching it and you're influencing them in certain ways. So I think it's, that's what.
Would you like to add anything there?
Actually, I want to ask you, you said there are not enough women at the decision making.
Yes.
But suppose somebody is working in an ad agency and comes up with an idea, that has these elements in it. Would they be met with opposition? I just want to try and understand, because in journalism, for instance, many editors are open still, even if they may not necessarily articulate it. If there is a determined journalist who wants to write something, which brings out, say, the voice of the women who are affected in a particular natural disaster or whatever, I don't think any editor will say no, because if they know the quality of the work that journalist gives. So I'm asking you the same about advertising because I don't know how it works.
So I'll give you an example, okay? I'm a mom, okay? And sometimes you need the time off from your children, right? So for example, if there's a young mom who's come into the boardroom saying, this is the ad I want to make, that, there's a mom who wants her me time, right? But if there are, say, men in the room, they've grown up with one certain perception about moms, that you cannot kind of, be away from the child, etc. So if it's a man making the decision, he will say, hey, but that's not how a mom needs a mom, that's not how a mom will be, because he's grown up thinking moms to be ideal, moms to be, this certain way, right? And if the man is the decision maker, there goes your representation, there goes your this thing. And most of the times that's what, does happen. So, there are not enough women voices in the book.
I think that's why it was very important for the ad that you did where you had the boy and the, with the stay free, talking about the period, because I think that's a very important sensitization. But I'd like to put it out there. I've always had this question actually about this film Queen, that do you think if a woman had taken that script to the production company, would they have made it, or would they have just said, is she mad? How can a woman go alone on a honeymoon? But it was so cute because a guy said that, So I haven't got any answers to that, but I know it's a good conversation starter. So I think coming to film, and we will come to, I think, what you're doing, Harshada, with the collective power of the Indian creative women, where I think you're trying very hard to place them. So we'll come back to that. But since we are on the topic of film, I think with Radhika, you being a cinematographer, a young cinematographer, and my third reference to the report, and I promise not to do this after that, is that there was a very important sort of person in the field who said that, by 2030, we may not even need cameras because everything will be produced by AI. And so it'll be intelligence that will produce everything. So my first thought with the gender hat on is that, so because AI feeds off everything that's fed into it, um, who will control that burning question we have about, the gaze? Is it the male gaze, female gaze behind the camera, the voyeuristic camera movements, or the lighting? Because you're going to put in people will put in a prompt. So as somebody who's, in the field and with this kind of, you've come in at a time when these disruptions are happening, what is your take on that,
Hi, good evening. This is my first time in a panel, so please do. Thanks for that. So please forgive me if I sound like Amir Khan taking so much time to think. So I'll try my best. In fact, when Bina ma'am messaged me that, you should go, and I was like, ma'am, you're so articulate, why are you sending me? She's like, just go. So I think as a woman, I think you feel like you're not qualified enough to be anywhere, and you are struggling with that thought on every stage, right? Right from school to college to interviews to every single space that you go, you struggle with this. And then, then there is this technology thing. So for me, I've lived over 20 years in Kerala, and I'm pretty sure a lot of people in the south. So Kerala, right now, Cochin is a city pretty much like a Bangalore, quite multicultural. But when I was growing up in 90s and early 2000s, it kind of seemed like a regressive space. It didn't feel very safe as a woman. And I think my instinct was to leave the state as soon as I was done with college. And then this whole thing of wanting to do cinematography, you finally enter film school, you manage to get the formal education, and by the end of the course, you have this new technology coming up and people telling you that, there's this next software, you have to learn the next software, and, get on with it. And nobody is going to hire you just for being a cinematographer. You might as well learn the software also, so you will get paid this and that. So now that the AIs come into the thing, so I truly feel, see, you can't deny it's going to be there. It's going to stick around for a while. And there will be a certain section of people who are going to find it really cost effective and might put money into it and hire people for it. And probably mine is the last generation who is learning the traditional camera system in filmmaking. And probably the generation after me is going to learn everything through AI. So they will get employees who will master AI in a better way. Having said that, I've had multiple people around me telling me that probably you should learn AI as well if you need to survive. So survival being the first instinct, you really cannot deny that it is not going to be there. So you might as well keep up with it instead of denying it, yes. Secondly, from my observation, in the Hindi industry, the people who hold the position of power, let's say, if you can think of most A-list filmmakers, directors, they are pretty much in denial of, denial in the sense they are not fully accepting of AI, right? We have had Mr. Vikramaditya Motwani speaking about AI and what he feels about it. He truly feels it is not the future. It might come for a bit and stay for a bit, but it cannot have soul to storytelling. So to some extent, as long as the traditional filmmakers exist, somebody like me have still some hope to find employment. And I am not sure how in 2030 it is going to be. I may not have a definite answer for it. But my instinct is, at this point, survival. And if it takes a little bit of extra time to learn a tool or at least have a knowledge of what it actually does and probably use in certain situations where it can be effective. And I think it can I think it is not entirely destructive in many ways, but at the same time, I really hope the traditional filmmaking exists too. And I think that connect with the camera and the connect people have with it is going to stay for a longer time. And yeah, I want to feel hopeful.
We're all there. So I don't know if Arshada can make you feel hopeful about how's it going to work in advertising for that.
I think Piyush used to say, right? He used to say that AI, you can use him, like a helper, like ye leke aao, pani leke aao, because it's never gonna replace heart. It's never gonna replace empathy. It's never gonna replace love, right? So you're gonna use it to better your craft, but not to replace. Unless what you said comes true.
We were discussing because there was a panel where Prasoon Pandey, there was again, it was, a discussion around AI because it was at the AI summit in Delhi. And he was like, no, I'm very excited with AI, but I know that AI will never get values. They'll never get the value system of the human being. And then I was listening to some, sort of spiritual lecture where the question being discussed, will AI ever have a soul? So I was saying, my God, how can they even discuss this? Is it going to be a possibility? So I don't know. It's the big devil, please. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah. Correct. 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 It's basically an average of the mediocre. It will never be able to replace human brilliance, like the connections that we make, right?
Yeah. So I don't know. Would you like to add?
Well, I mean, again, if you mention AI, then I'm a Luddite. I have friends of my age who say, "Oh, you haven't tried Grok and you haven't tried ChatGPT and whatever." And I said, "No, I think I still prefer to write, use this." But anyway, I'm not the average person, and the younger journalists, I'm sure, doing it. But I think for journalism also, maybe you still have to step out and get that information. But I think I read somewhere, I think the Scotsman or one of these papers had a story saying journalists don't need to write anymore. But that's so stupid, because in India, in English language newspapers, we often had journalists who were not very fluent in English, but they were very good journalists because they knew the area, they knew they had the contacts, they could get the story, and all they did was they came back and dictated, what had happened, and somebody at the desk wrote it. Quite simple. So, what's new about that, So, but the legwork that was done by that individual, who's going to do that? AI can't do that work. So, yeah, and the principles that we were taught as journalists when we go out to do a story, that whether they'll survive in the kind of media sphere we have, that is a very big question. So I think this technology only comes as part of it. I think Alka should...
So just before I give it, there's a very brilliant film that's doing the festival circuit and is some screenings. It's called Humans in the Loop, which is, I think, answering a lot of that as to, what the data, input that's being done at an indigenous level has to be done to make it authentic. I mean, I thought it was just pure brilliance, that film, and thankfully everybody is thinking on those lines if they can. So my take on this would be that I think it should be made a lot more universal and accessible to be able to understand, and as Dr. Sharda said, to use it as a tool, pretty much like that hole in the box project, where they left the computer in that hole, and how the kids who were not even literate learned how to use the computer and work with it and actually browse. So, yeah, sorry. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I was going to say that, I was in the 90s, from my time when it was slow journalism. You typed your copy, it would then be sent to a typesetter who would set it in lead. There would be galleys which would then be put together on a page. From that page, then an impression would be made, would be then put on rollers, and then the newspaper. Yeah. So slow, I call it slow journalism. And we had to type 3 copies because one had to go into the spike, kept on the desk. One would go to the typesetter, and one would go in our file. So we knew that this is what we'd filed. And one would go to the desk for them to change. Anyway, I think when I was at the Times, that's when a different technology came in. So typesetters were not needed because we all did our stories on computers, and they went directly to where the galleys were made, And so the paste up and the galleys were still there. That means the paste up artists, as they were called, would still make up the page, and we as editors or subs could still see the page. But in 2 years or 3 years, even that went, because then the page maker came in. So even that process was gone. So what I'm saying is that technology kept changing. But for me, what is more worrying is that the technology changed, but the quality of what was going into those very same things that were done in this slow way into a much faster process is what is really worrying, because suddenly there was no space for the kind of stories we were all allowed to do or encouraged to do with no money. Transport, you had to take buses or ST buses in Maharashtra. To stay, you had to stay at dark bungalows. But still, great stories were done, and they came out. But the positive side of it is, because of the fact that everybody is a journalist, also because journalists who don't want to be stuck in this mainstream media, which restricts the space for the kind of writing we feel we as journalists should be doing, now have an option, which they didn't have. So therefore, the YouTube channels, therefore the independent journalists who are able to write for independent digital platforms and do the kind of journalism that used to be done and is still being done. And that is still having an impact, When you see the awards that are given, so many of them are by individual independent journalists who have somehow figured out how they can do the story they want to do, whether it's about the Northeast, about Kashmir, about conflict, about, caste in India, about women, about violence, all these stories that you don't find now in the newspapers and in mainstream media, they're all there, and they're all being recognized. So I think, as always, there's always the plus and the minus.
I think Dr. Lakshmi wanted to say something, but just while we're talking about film, one more very relevant example of a film that was, because you're talking about the changing technologies, when internet started happening, we watched a documentary which is very relevant to the war situation right now with the internet blackout in Iran. And at that time, what was called Burma. So the film was called Burma VJ. And because of the junta there, they had blacked out the internet when the whole uprising was happening, etc. And this documentary was actually for the first time created by the citizen video journalists, and they somehow managed to sneak out the USBs or the pen drives or whatever to a filmmaker and editor sitting in Denmark. And he edited this film, and at that time it was one of the absolutely iconic films telling you what actually happened there. So I'm saying in relevance to what's happening with the Gaza, Iran, and all the internet being shut off, you know. So Dr. Lakshmi, I think, wanted to say something.
Quick question, it's now, let's say, more than 50 years of women's movements in India and feminism in India, and a lot of the ideas have percolated across the board. Do you think women's movements have contributed to your art, craft, and to your thought processes, or that's part of the noise in the background?
Yeah, and that's a great segue to actually what we were going to talk about now, the power of the collectives that all three on the stage represent. So I think it's a great segue to that.
For me personally, if I hadn't, so I did my post-graduation from Sophia College. There is a course called SEM, Social Communications Media. I don't think if I hadn't been there, I would have ever recognized anything about my rights as a woman or my existence as a woman. As a matter of fact, I think the seed that the course put on our heads regarding the representation of cinema, the male gaze, all of that was introduced to us. So for me, it was a turning point in my life. So somewhere I am more sensitive towards this gender thing, especially when I am approaching a workspace, when I am talking to somebody, or I'm just gauging their energy, what kind of a person they are, and all of that. So, but unfortunately, if I have to, so I work both in Mumbai and in Kerala. It's a very ironic thing. Kerala being, it's a very progressive society in many aspects, but it is also very regressive in many other aspects as well. A lot of women from Kerala have moved out, and they are all in cities like Mumbai and Bangalore and Delhi. And so when you go back to Kerala and look for women to work in your team, there are none. They're all here. So I struggle. So the last work I did was in Kerala, and I was looking to employ. I wanted one girl in my team. I wasn't getting options, and I struggled with it. So at least the conversations have started, and I must give it to the WCC for that. And that is what the shift, I must say, the shift has happened only after WCC. I must say in full confidence that before WCC, there was no conversation about gender or any awareness. I don't think anybody was wondering about where are the women. They were quite comfortable working with their brothers. And I have been on sets where I was the only girl with 70 men. And every time you struggle when there is an issue, you didn't have anybody to talk to, and who do I go to? So, no women's toilet, but I was fortunate. Of course, there are no toilets, but I was fortunate where my boss was quite sensitive to it, where I'm the only few who was little privileged on this aspect. My boss actually took me, arranged a cab actually for me, because we were shooting on the road, and he arranged a cab for me, got the production to arrange a car, took me to a nearby shopping mall, and she needs to use the toilet, and then drop her back. So there was at least that courtesy given to me, but a lot of women are not even given that. So on that aspect, I was lucky. The only thing I can say is that there is a conversation happening. And WCZ as a collective has put that seed in everybody. And there is this fear, which none of us have wished. We really wished people didn't employ women because they were scared. We really wish it came from their genuine wanting to have a balance in workspace. But right now, in Kerala, I don't think situation has changed much. It is going to take a few more years for things to happen and fall in place. But there is some response from the Kerala government, which is what I have noticed. They have lately come up with a Kerala film policy with the measures of what can be done, what they would like to do in the future, although the way they want to implement, how they want to implement is not at all mentioned. And, but at least there is a PDF file, thank God. See, that is a bar, how low the bar was. So, so right now, at least we feel, okay, there is some conversation happening. At least I don't see any conversation happening here either. And I truly feel there are enough problems in Hindi industry also. But nobody's even making any conversation. At least there, you have at least pushed the needle in some direction. So, yeah.
Yeah, so for those who don't know, WCC stands for the Women in Cinema Collective, which was an outcome of an act of violence. And I think I'm a great fan because they stood there, they've stood fast, and at the cost of many careers, many have paid with their professional, they've been kind of completely sidelined. We know what happened with Beena, but I think, the policies that came up, and also that they just stood there to get the Hema Commission report out. And that Hema Commission report, I think, was a game changer. And before we get to the power of the question that you asked about, does the power of the collectives, the movements help? We have two others. But, we can, again, raise a toast to the WCC because I was invited to a panel at the Sao Paulo Film Festival by a similar sort of collective they have there. It's called Mães Mulheres, which means women in leadership in the audiovisual industry. And there are about 100 who's who people there. And the panel was exactly about this whole gender thing. And I took Beena Paul's permission to talk about the Hema Commission because it had just been released a few days before I was going. And I said, can I talk? And the report that I had the privilege of working with Dr. Lakshmi Bai. I mean, I cannot tell you how impressed they were, even though Brazil has such a robust industry, entertainment and audiovisual industry. They have no posh laws, no IC committees. They wanted to immediately sign an MOU with WCC. They wanted to do a similar research. So I think there is, as she said, the conversations have begun, we're getting somewhere. So there is where I would like to ask about, sort of network that was formed with Kalpana and many amazing ladies 20 years ago about what you've done in terms of the solidarity and standing with the women journalists for their rights and how it's worked and how it's still happening.
Well, 24 actually. No, but before that, I'm going to say something very facetious. Instead of just the Kerala story, why don't we have a film called The Toilet Story? Because that would be the ultimate feminist story. Any professional woman who has worked in any establishment, one of the first battles you have to fight is to get a decent toilet. Yeah. Anyway, that said, yeah. So, and Lakshmi, also, I'm part of that generation which was in a way part of the women's movement. So we were influenced by it. It made us think about ourselves, about women's equality, which our mothers had not thought about. And then when we came into a profession, luckily for us, for me, for instance, I had an editor who suggested to me that I write a column from the gender perspective, And I was amazed that he suggested it, and I managed to write it for 30 years. I traveled, did my tour of newspapers in India. But it was around in 2002 that some of us women journalists met in Delhi. And as a result of regional conferences that had been organized through some NGO funding, I can't remember now exactly what it was, and Amu Joseph was the one who had taken the initiative to get that going. But at that meeting in Delhi, it was very clear that apart from, actually sexual harassment had not come into the picture at that point, but we certainly felt the lack of opportunities, the kind of ways in which we could not cover certain beats, that women were automatically given the so-called soft beats, health and all these kind of things, cultural affairs, vagera, entertainment. But if you want to do politics, if you wanted to cover defense, if you want to cover economy, it was very difficult. Those are male bastions you couldn't get through. So those are the kind of issues we discussed. And we felt it would be a good idea to form some kind of network. We didn't know how it would evolve. But I want to make 2 or 3, Network of Women in Media now maybe has 1,000 women from all over India. And not only from the metros, that is what's important. These are women who write in the different languages, so from Chhattisgarh, from Jharkhand, from the Northeast, from Kashmir, these women are part of it. It's not a formal organization. We made a deliberate decision about this in a country like ours, which is so hierarchical. You know, it just unthinkingly we continue to replicate hierarchy in whatever we do. We decided we will not have a hierarchy, that we will truly be a collective, which makes it much harder to do anything, but it is happening. The other thing is, in our profession, in journalism, it's highly competitive, as I guess it is in most other professions, but journalism even more so, because your byline gives you the visibility, which then gives you access, which then gives you power, because you access the powerful, and you think you have power too. Nobody shares contacts. I'll tell you that when I moved from Bombay to work with Indian Express in Delhi, my roommate, my flatmate was a journalist who was an old friend of mine. We had worked together in Himmat. Another friend also in the same paper was also from former Himmat. They would not share any contact. Leave alone everybody else. When I joined Indian Express, the first question I was asked by one of my male colleagues was, "Acha, so who do you know in Delhi?" I said, "What kind of question is that?" So he said, "I mean, do you have uncles or your relatives or somebody in, high office?" I said, "Why? I'm a journalist. You're supposed to drop me anywhere and I'm supposed to be able to find a story. That's my training." But this is what journalism is. Therefore, something like the Network of Women in Media is truly remarkable because it is intergenerational, non-hierarchical, and everybody shares contacts. If you see our WhatsApp messages, it's extraordinary. Some young journalists will say, "I have to write a article on such and such. Can somebody help me with contacts? Who should I speak to?" Or if they want a particular contact, they post and immediately 2-3 people will DM that person and send the contacts. So this is so unusual, So it gives me great hope because it's possible to do it. And it fills a need both in terms of standing up for those who are harassed sexually or any other way within our profession, standing up for people outside also in the media and elsewhere who are similarly victimized or harassed or arrested for speaking out, like the Kashmiri journalists. We stand up for them. So, that's what the network is about. And for me, as an older journalist, certainly I've been amazed each year that we still survive. Each year we have a meeting. And we had it in Trivandrum this time, and we had a session with WCC. And, No, it was our NWMI meeting. And, everybody paid their way, everybody came there, about 200 women journalists from all over India turned up. For some, we raised money, everybody contributes as scholarships for the people who cannot come. So it is truly unusual, and long may it last. It's very difficult in the atmosphere we have today, where there are so few solidarities and collective action. So here's hoping.
So I know we're out of town, but just a minute more, if you can bear with, I think another very, very important collective action that's being done in the advertising world, where they've come together with the Indian creative women. And I think what is unique is that you are trying to place the women in the right positions. And also my question to you would be about, how do you do that in the tier 2 and 3 cities, especially to win the confidence of the clients, for them to deal with them? So if quickly, I know we've got so much to talk about, and we have a gorgeous dancer and a poet, and I think, we have to get everybody back into a bit of an enjoyment mode. So just quickly.
I'll keep it very quick, and I'd like to address, the people who you said, say, these programs are useless. So screw them, because I've seen the impact of these programs firsthand, right? I was part of See It, Be It, where this one legend of a person, Madonna Badger, said that women have been taught, right, that power is finite, right? Power is like air. It's enough for everyone, and that is, the damage that has been done has to be undone. So you need these programs, you need these, so the girls who've come out of See It, Be It, right, they've gone, so there are 20 girls who meet at Cannes every year. They go through training, they meet mentors, they meet leaders, they go back to their countries and they've started such amazing programs where these younger girls look at them and they're more inspired to stay in advertising, because if they don't stay, you will not have them become leaders and go on to make the work that they're making. So it's extremely important. ICW actually has some 4, seed beat girls who've come back, and, Sakshi has founded it. So it's extremely, important to
So I think, yeah, so I think as the voice that's been given to us by Ladli on this platform to discuss these issues, I hope we can continue the conversation around with everybody who's here in the room. How do we actually take these forward towards the responsibility required by institutions, organizations, corporates, etc., to make it an equal playing field, and change mindsets. I think that's the underlying factor. So thank you so much, and I think, we've had a great interactive conversation, and let's look forward to some fun now. Thank you.
Thank you. I ask you to just stay back for a minute. Can I ask Dr. Sharda and Sridharji to please come up on stage and give them a memento? Okay, downstairs, fine. Yeah, Sridharji, please. There are 2 of you. As a very beautiful point that Kalpana ji made, saying, why don't we make a film about toilet story? I was interviewing yesteryear legend Mumtaz ji recently, and she told me when she was recording Jai Jai Shiv Shankar, the song, she told me that the scariest thing was that she wanted to go to the loo, and there was no toilet. And the choreographer kept giving her steps which required vigorous movement. Thank you. Yeah, please pose for a picture. I was just saying that I interviewed Mumtaz ji this last week, and she told me of how she had extreme trouble during the shooting of the song Jai Jai Shiv Shankar, the popular number. And she said that all she wanted to do was go to the loo, and there was no toilet available. So finally, because she told the director that I'll have to cancel the shoot, I can't do this, because they were giving a very difficult dance steps which she needed to jump up and down. Said it is not going. So they finally got old saris, and 4 assistants held the saris around, and she used the open air space to relieve herself. So, I mean, can you imagine from where we've come to what level? So, thank you so much. That was a rich, layered, and refreshingly honest conversation. And now the conversation, the evening sort of shifts gears, and we return to remembrance in honor of late Bobby Sista, whose legacy reminds us that words can carry both weight and wings. Please welcome performer singer Sunita Rao, an icon many of us have grown up listening to, who now brings us a different kind of music through poetry. Sunita has been the spokesperson and a strong supporter of Ladli since its inception in 2006, having composed and performed the curtain raiser song and film Ye Hai Ladli, and produced the music video Sun Zara in association with UNFPA to advocate against prenatal sex selection. Recently, she had a beautiful concert of all her songs at the NMACC, which I had the privilege of. Yeah. Come. Come. And now the original Pari.
Yes. Okay. Always interesting to listen to the conversations. I would like to congratulate Population First on their 24th Foundation Day. I've been with you from the beginning, and I'm always going to be with you. We've been listening to a lot of interesting facts and figures, but I'm going to be giving you not my words, but the words of a very, very incredible woman, and her name is Maya Angelou. All of you must have heard of her. Yes, she definitely deserves an applause. Is this too close? It's popping a bit. Is this okay? All right, it's okay. Okay. So, do something. It's like popping every time I'm... Hello. Check. Chalega, he says. Okay. Pretty women wonder where my secret lies. I'm not cute or built to fit some fashion model size. But when I start to tell them, they think I'm telling lies. I say it's in the reach of my arms, in the span of my hip, in the stride of my step, in the curl of my lip. I'm a woman, phenomenal woman. That's me. I walk into a room just as cool as you please, and to a man. The fellows stand and fall down on their knees, and then they swarm around me, a hive of honeybees. I say, it's the fire in my eyes, and the flash in my teeth, and the swing in my waist, and the joy in my feet. I'm a woman, phenomenally. Phenomenal woman, that's me. Men themselves have wondered what they see in me. They try so much, but they just can't touch my inner mystery. And when I try to show them, they still can't see. I say it's in the arch of my back, in the sun of my smile, in the ride of my breasts, in the grace of my style. Because I'm a woman, phenomenally. Phenomenal woman, that's me. Now you understand why my head's not bowed. I don't shout or jump about or have to talk too loud. When you see me passing, you ought to be proud. Because you see, it's in the click of my heels, in the bend of my hair, in the palm of my hand, in the need for my care. Because I'm a woman, phenomenally. Phenomenal woman, that's my mother. That's my sister. That's my grandmother. That's your mother, your grandmother, your sister, you, Dolly, you, Anuja, you, Dr. Sharda, you, Kalpana, you, Rashmi, you, Pooja, the lovely lady in the pink and white striped sari. That's every beautiful woman, my lovely Bharatanatyam dancer, Devika here, who I was in class with. And that's who every ladli will become, phenomenally, because I'm a woman, phenomenal woman. That's me. Precious words.
No, of course. Thank you. Was that powerful, evocative, and deeply felt? And now, we now invite Ms. Anuja Gulati, Program Management Specialist at UNFPA India, and a consistent supporter of Ladli, to continue this journey on the way like my literature professor Eunice D'Souza used to say, on the wings of poesy. Yes, please.
Thank you, Yogesh. What an enriching evening it has been. Sharda told me, Anuja, you need to speak. And I told her, Sharda, 25 years I've been associated with Ladli, with Population First, even before you came in. And year after year, you call me to say how wonderful and how enriching this experience has been. I still can't forget the day, almost 2.5 decades back, when a 70-year-old young man walked into our office and said, Anuja, I need your help, I need your support. I need someone to help me put together a proposal. I want to work on issues of population. To the day this name came up, Population First, and I was against it. I said, no, Mr. Sista, I stand for people first. To now, 24 years, 25 years later, I said, Sharda, don't again tell me to speak, because all I'm going to say, it's been very, very rewarding. It's been wonderful, the association. And now, unfortunately, we are phasing out. And we all know the reasons. But like she said, I'm really hopeful we can continue. I want to leave, like Sharda said, Ladli in your hands. But before that, again, thank Sharda for nurturing her with so much care. Thank each one of you who've been associated as grandmothers, our dear Dolly, young Dolly, Sunita, Yogesh, Mr. Sridhar, all of you. Anyway, Mr. Ramesh Narayan, we met him in the morning. So there. So I said, Sharda, then what do I do? She said, why don't you recite a poem? I said, okay, I'm going to do Phenomenal Woman. But I'm so glad I didn't do it, because I wouldn't have ever been able to do it like you did. So here I present to you, and I'm not going to be as good as Sunita, this poem called Aurat by Kaifi Azmi, which is a very, very powerful and progressive piece about women's liberation and equality. It was written way back in the 1940s, as really a response to the traditional views that confine women to very submissive roles. At its core, Aurat is a call for women to break free from oppression and walk along with men as equals, not behind them. And that's the core of this poem. The poem closely connects, I feel, with the Ladli campaign in terms of challenging gender inequality, transforming how society really views women and girls. And on the occasion of Mr. Sista's 95th birth anniversary, I'd like to dedicate this poem to him, who I called our very own Ladla, who stood unwaveringly for women's rights and equality. Mr. Sista, we deeply miss you today and will always miss you. So here's the poem. उठ मेरी जान, मेरे साथ चलना है तुझे. तू है कि बेजान खिलौनों से बहल जाती है, तपती सांसों की हरारत से पिघल जाती है. पाँव जिस राह पे रखती है, फिसल जाती है. बन के सीमाब हर एक ज़र्फ़ में ढल जाती है. जिस्त के आहनी सांचे में भी ढलना है तुझे. जिस्त के आहनी सांचे में भी ढलना है तुझे. This is about how you need to listen to your own soul. उठ मेरी जान, मेरे साथ चलना है तुझे. गोशे गोशे यानी कि हर कोने में, कोने कोने में सुलगती है चिता तेरे लिए. फ़र्ज़ का भेष बदलती है कग़ज़ा तेरे लिए. कहर है तेरी हर एक नर्म अदा तेरे लिए. ज़हर ही ज़हर है दुनिया की हवा तेरे लिए. रुत बदल डाल अगर फूलना फलना है तुझे. रुत बदल डाल अगर फलना फूलना है तुझे. उठ मेरी जान, मेरे साथ ही चलना है तुझे. मेरे पीछे नहीं, मेरे साथ ही चलना है. कद्र अब तक तेरी तारीख ने जानी ही नहीं. कद्र तेरी किसी ने जानी ही नहीं. तुझ में शोले भी हैं, बस अश्क फिशानी ही नहीं. तू हकीकत भी है, दिलचस्प कहानी ही नहीं. तेरी हस्ती भी है एक चीज़, जवानी ही नहीं. एंड आई लव दिस लाइन. तेरी हस्ती भी है एक चीज़, सिर्फ जवानी ही नहीं. अपनी तारीख का उन्वान बदलना है तुझे, उठ मेरी जान, मेरे साथ चलना है तुझे. Thank you. Thank you so much. And thanks. I hope I haven't left out any names. If I did, I didn't mention your name. No, no. Essentially a very, very important part.
Thank you, Sunita and Anita, Anuja ji. Those words will linger. To borrow from Wordsworth, you know, at the end of Solitary Reaper, Wordsworth says, he says the music, but I'm going to say, the poetry in my heart I bore, long after it could be heard no more. And now, we come to a special address. May I now invite the OG Ladli to use lingo from Alpha generation, you know, instead of Gen Z. Our OG Ladli, Dolly Thakur, a voice, a presence, and a personality that needs no introduction to share a few thoughts. But you never need any preparation.
Do I need a mic?
Oh, please. No, you can please be, because the camera will need.
I really don't know where to begin. Bobby has been a part of my life and my journey from way before Sharda came on the scene. And when he was in advertising, it was at that time when I knew Bobby. And I used to compare a whole lot of programs for Bobby for his young business entrepreneurs. Awards that we used to have at the Taj. And I'm talking about 40 years ago, 35 years ago, definitely, if not more. So I owe my life to Bobby, and Bobby gave me all the courage to stand here and talk to all of you and to learn. And I don't, like most of you, I've done advertising, I've done media, I've done TV, I've done dancing, I've done acting, I've done everything except singing. I can't sing. So, Population First is very much a part of my heart, and I hope that I have been able to inspire people. Today there are not very many here, but in the bathroom, I got lots of compliments from the few women that I bump into there, who said that they'd been waiting to come and hold my hand and say how well they had responded to me. So I can't recognize any of them here just now. I think they've all left. But it was, there's one there waving out. So it's given me great pleasure to be involved with Ladli, give courage to Ladlis, and I'm a Ladli, and I will remain a Ladli forever.
For someone who's grown up, you know, my dad told me to watch her on television to improve my English. From then on to then, she knowing me when I was in my 11th grade. I mean, really, we've come a long way. Oh, so Anuja ji also says that her parents also made her watch television to improve. Not that her diction is any poor. Thank you so much, Dolly ma'am. You don't need any prepared speech. Your eloquence personified. And now, from words to movement, I should warn you, when it comes to dance, I belong firmly to the audience, full of admiration, light on coordination. I was born with 2 left feet, so most of my friends tell me never to even attempt dancing at parties, and wise enough to know the difference between the two. What we are about to witness, however, belongs to another realm altogether, where discipline meets devotion, and the body becomes a geometric tool to draw patterns and tell stories. It is my pleasure to introduce Devika Manish Rajgod, a Bharatanatyam performer and teacher with a master's degree in the art form. Known for her grace, rigor, and deep sense of bhakti, she has performed at prestigious platforms including Lakme Fashion Week, Chennai Festival, and the Ran Utsav. This evening, she presents a piece invoking the strength and spirit of the goddess Durga, followed by a tribute to Lord Shiva as Natraja, the divine dancer. Put your hands together for Miss Rajguru.
विवाह पावितस्थले कलेवलम्ब्य लम्बितां भुजङ्गपुङ्गमालिका तवड्डमड्डमड्डमन्निनादवड्डमर्वयं चकार चण्डताण्डवं तनोतु नः शिव शिव जटाकटाह सम्भ्रम भ्रम निलिम्ब निर्झरी विलोल वीचि वल्लरी विराजमान मूर्धनि धगद्धगद्धगज्ज्वलल्ललाट पट्ट पावके किशोर चन्द्रशेखरे रति प्रतिक्षणम् जटाभुजङ्ग पिङ्गल स्फुरत्फणामणि प्रभा कदम्ब कुङ्कुमद्रव प्रलिप्त दिग्वधूमुखे मदान्त सिन्धुरस्फुरत्वगुत्तरीय मेदुरे मनोविनोदमद्भुतं बिभर्तु भूतभर्तरी ॐ नमः शिवाय सदा शिवं भजाम्यहं सदा शिवं भजाम्यहम् ॐ नमः शिवाय
Just put it off. Thank you. Yes. Thank you, Devika. Thank you so much. That was beautiful, poised, powerful. Before, before, before I also, can I, yeah, I'm just going to say that. We would also like to request Anuja ji and Sunita ji to kindly join us for presentation of mementos. And Dolly ma'am, can you come up and do the honors, please? With Dr. Vibhuti Patel. Dr. Vibhuti Patel, can you come up on stage, please, and felicitate? Come, come. You, Pooja, please help. Come. And just like that, we've come to the close of an evening that has held many textures, thought, memory, music, and the power of poetry also. As we celebrate, thank you, please take your seats. Please, Sunita ji. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, for. Can we, Dr. Sharda? Dr. Sharda? Yes, we have to also call Mr. Sridhar. Can you come up on the stage, please? And you, Miss, this is Dr. Sharda. Can you please felicitate Mr. Sridhar, our very own Pops? And this is. As we celebrate 24 years of Population First, we also carry forward the enduring spirit of our late Bobby Sista, a reminder that media at its best is not just about reach, but also about responsibility. Because change is not only written in policies, it is whispered in stories, carried in voices, and lived by people like all of you gathered here. Thank you for being such a generous and, might I say, indulgent audience. Do stay back and linger a while and let the conversations continue. Have a wonderful evening ahead. Thank you. अरे अरे नहीं मुझे क्या दे रहे हो